For 16 years, my wife spent every Thursday sitting alone on the same park bench. One day I finally followed her. Until I retired, I worked every Thursday afternoon and was rarely home when Marion left. I knew she sometimes went out, but I never asked where. After retirement, physical therapy put me home at the same hour each week. That was when I noticed a pattern. She left our house in Salem, Oregon, at 2:10 every Thursday afternoon, drove 12 minutes to Riverfront Park, and sat on the third bench past the footbridge from 2:30 until 3:30. Exactly 1 hour. She never read, never used her phone, never bought coffee from the cart nearby. She simply watched the walking path. Then she came home. After the fourth Thursday, I asked why. Marion smiled and said, "I just like the park." I did not believe her. My name is Robert Ellison. I was 68 then, retired from managing a regional appliance warehouse. Marion and I had been married 41 years. She was not a woman who sat still for pleasure. At home, she folded laundry during television commercials. She wiped counters while waiting for water to boil. Even at church, her fingers moved across the edge of the bulletin. But every Thursday, for exactly 1 hour, she became motionless. The first time I watched from a distance, a gray-haired man in a green jacket walked past her. Marion sat forward. The man smiled. She smiled back. He slowed down. My stomach tightened. Then he kept walking. 10 minutes later, another man approached from the opposite direction. Younger, broad shoulders, baseball cap pulled low. Marion rose halfway from a bench. He passed without looking at her. She sat down again. At 3:29, she checked her watch. At 3:30, she left. That evening, she made spaghetti, asked about my physical therapy appointment, and never mentioned the park. I almost confronted her. Instead, I asked, "Good afternoon?" She looked at me a little too long. Quiet. I watched her carry our plates to the sink. For the first time in our marriage, I wondered whether Thursday belonged to another man, and whether I had spent 16 years unknowingly making room for him. The next Thursday, I followed her again. I parked near the carousel and watched through the branches of a row of young maples. Marion arrived at 2:28. Same bench. Same side. She smoothed her skirt beneath her and placed her purse on her left, leaving room on the right. That detail bothered me. She was not only watching the path, she was saving a seat. At 2:40, a man walking a tan dog waved. Marion lifted her hand. At 2:53, a city bus stopped near the corner, for people crossed toward the park. Marion studied each face. An older man carrying groceries, a woman in medical scrubs, a teenager wearing headphones, a tall man with silver hair. When the tall man turned toward her, Marion's lips parted. Then he walked past. She looked down at her hands. A few minutes later, a man in a brown work jacket came toward the bench. Marion smiled before he reached her. She stood. So, did he? For 1 second, I was certain I had found the person she was waiting for. Then he pointed toward the ground. Marion bent, picked up a knit glove beside the bench, and handed it to him. He thanked her and kept walking. She watched him disappear down the path. Then she sat again. I drove home before she left because I did not want her to see my truck. That night, she seemed distracted. She put salt in the refrigerator and the butter in the pantry. When I pointed out, she laughed. Getting old. No, I said, you're somewhere else. She closed the refrigerator. Am I? I gave her the chance to tell me. She did not. Our marriage had survived layoffs, my father's illness, her mother moving in with us, and a year when we spoke almost entirely through practical questions. We had rebuilt carefully, not perfectly. There were rooms in the past we entered only when necessary. One of them involved Marion's younger brother, Peter. They had once been close. Now we almost never spoke his name. The next morning I asked, "Have you heard from Peter?" Her coffee cup stopped near her mouth. Why would you ask that? No reason. She lowered the cup. Then don't ask questions you don't mean. She left for work without finishing breakfast. That was when I knew Peter mattered. I still did not know how. Marion worked 3 mornings a week at a fabric store. On Friday, while she was gone, I drove back to Park. I did not expect answers from an empty bench. I found only enough to make the mystery worse. A man who operated the coffee cart recognized Marion's description. Thursday lady, he said. You know her? Not her name. How long has she been coming? He shrugged. Years. My uncle ran this cart before me. She was already here then. Does she meet anyone? Not that I've seen. What does she do? Watches the path. That's all. Sometimes she asks questions. What kind of questions? He studied me. You her husband? Yes. He wiped the counter with a towel. Then maybe ask her. I pressed him once more. Does she seem afraid? No. Happy? Sometimes. For a second. That answer stayed with me. The vendor handed coffee to another customer, and our conversation was over. I walked to Marion's bench. The wood was smooth where years of people had sat. Nothing was carved into it. No marker. No message. Just a public bench beside a path used by hundreds of strangers. That night, Marion and I ate dinner in near silence. She cut her chicken into pieces and moved them around her plate. Finally, she said, You followed me. It was not a question. I put down my fork. Yes. How many times? Twice. Her face tightened. You had no right. You kept the same routine for me for 16 years. I did not hide every Thursday. No, you only hid what they meant. She pushed her chair back. I said, Are you waiting for someone? Marion stood completely still. Then she whispered, You should have left it alone. She walked into the bedroom and closed the door. The next morning, an old family photograph was gone from the drawer where we kept pictures. I did not know which one she had taken, but I knew she had removed it because of me. For 3 days, Marion answered only necessary questions. Did we need milk? Was the dentist appointment Tuesday? Had I fed the cat? Nothing else. On Monday evening, she found me sitting at the kitchen table. She placed a photograph between us. Peter stood beside the river with one hand raised against the sun. He was 38, thin, dark hair, a mustache he had grown because he thought it made him look older. When was this taken? I asked. The last summer he was here. Is this what you show people at the park? Sometimes. Why? She sat across from me. Because that is where he used to wait. Peter attended a recovery meeting at a church downtown every Thursday afternoon. Afterward, he sat on that bench until Marion finished work and picked him up. For almost a year, she drove him home, sometimes to his apartment, sometimes to ours for dinner. He was sober then. I asked, trying. I remembered that year differently. Peter missed work, borrowed money, showed up without calling. He was better than before, but not reliable enough for me to trust. One Thursday, Marion arrived late to park. Peter was gone. He called her the next morning and said he was leaving Oregon. He told you where? No. Did he ever call again? Once. When? 16 years ago. That matched the beginning of the park visits. Marion had received a call at the fabric store. Peter said he might return to Salem. He asked whether the Thursday bench was still there. She said yes. He told her, if I come back, that's where I'll start. Then the line disconnected. No number. No address. Every Thursday since, Marion had gone to the bench. I stared at her. You've never been meeting anyone. No, you've been watching strangers. Yes. That was the first major truth. There was no secret man, no affair, no hidden romance. My wife had spent 16 years searching the faces of strangers for a brother who might never come. The answer should have ended my suspicion. Instead, it created a harder question. Why didn't you tell me? Marion looked toward the dark window. Because you believe Peter left because he chose drinking over us. That is what happened. She shook her head. No, Robert. Then she said, he left because of something you told him. I remembered Peter coming to our house the week before he disappeared. Marion and I were in a bad period. My warehouse had cut half the night crew. I worked 12-hour shifts and came home angry at everyone who needed something. Marion's mother was living with us after hip surgery. Our daughter had moved back home after ending an engagement. The house felt crowded with other people's problems. Peter arrived on a Thursday evening carrying a duffel bag. He had lost his apartment after falling behind on rent. He asked to stay with us for 2 weeks. Marion wanted to say yes. I said no. Not gently. He has had enough chances, I told her in the kitchen. Peter heard us from the hallway. Marion said, he's been sober 8 months. I answered, then he can prove it somewhere else. Peter left before dinner. I remembered that argument. What I did not remember was seeing him the next afternoon. Marion was at work. Peter came back alone. He asked for you? I said. Marion nodded. Peter wanted to know whether she truly did not want him in our house, or whether I had made the decision. What did I tell him? You know. I did not. Then the memory arrived. Peter stood on our porch, jaw tight, both hands wrapped around the strap of his duffel bag. He asked, did Marion say no too? I was tired, ashamed of the argument, afraid he would return to the kitchen and ask her again. So I said, she's done, Peter. She wants you to stop coming here. Marion had never said that. She wanted 2 weeks to find another arrangement. I turned her hesitation into rejection because I wanted the problem gone before she came home. Peter nodded once. He said, tell her I understand. I never delivered that message. When Marion asked whether he returned, I said no. That evening, Peter took a bus out of Salem. For years, Marion believed he left without saying goodbye. Peter believed his sister had told him to disappear. One rushed sentence had severed them, and I had forgotten it because, to me, it had been the end of an exhausting afternoon. To Peter, it had been the end of his family. Marion learned the truth 16 years earlier, during Peter's only phone call. He asked why she had changed her mind about letting him stay. She said she had not. There was a long silence. Then he repeated exactly what I had told him on the porch. She knew the words came from me. What did you say to him? I asked. I said, you must have misunderstood. You protected me. I protected the conversation. I thought if I started blaming you, he would hang up. Did he? Eventually. Peter told her he had stayed sober for several years after leaving Oregon, then relapsed after losing a construction job. He had lived in Idaho, Nevada, and somewhere in Northern California. He said he was tired of people who remembered only his worst years. Marion asked him to come home. He said, maybe. Then he mentioned the bench. That was the last time she heard his voice. I sat across from her with the old photograph between us. Why didn't you confront me? I did. You never told me about the call. Not about the call. She reminded me of a conversation that same week. She asked whether I had ever spoken to Peter after our kitchen argument. I said no. A second lie. You looked me in the face, she said, and lied again. I remembered her standing beside the laundry basket. I remembered wondering why the question mattered. I had buried the porch conversation so deeply that the lie came easily. Why stay silent after that? At first, because I was furious. She slept in the guest room for several nights and told me she was having hot flashes. Then our daughter announced she was pregnant. Marion's mother fell again. Life filled every open space. Weeks passed. Then months. Marion began going to the park because Peter had said he might return there. Each Thursday, she thought she would tell me afterward. Each Thursday, she came home without seeing him. Then the secret became its own routine, she said. You let me believe he abandoned you. Yes. You let me talk about him like he chose this. Yes. Her voice broke. I could not tell you without telling you what you had done, and I thought you were already caring enough. That was partly love. It was also punishment. She did not deny either one. For years, Marion had listened while I described Peter as unreliable. Sometimes she corrected me. More often she went quiet. I used her silence as agreement. That was wrong, she said. So was what I did. Yes. The word landed cleanly. No softening. I asked why she continued going after so many years. Because he said he might come back. He might be dead. I know. He might have a family somewhere. I know. He might not want to be found. She looked at me. I know. That ended the argument. The park was not a plan. It was the only promise she could still keep. Thursday. Same time. Same bench. I asked whether anyone there had ever resembled him closely. Hundreds of people, for 1 second. She told me about a man who walked with Peter's uneven stride, a bus driver with his hands, a gray-haired stranger who turned after she said Peter's name, then apologized because he thought she meant someone else. Each time, hope arrived before reason. Each time, she carried the disappointment home and made dinner. I had eaten those meals without knowing what they cost her. That night, we lay in bed with a wide space between us. I said, "You should have told me." Marion faced the ceiling. "You should not have made the truth so difficult to bring home." I know. No, Robert. You know now. The words echoed what Peter might have said if I ever found him. I asked whether she hated me. Sometimes. The honesty hurt less than comfort would have. Do you still? Sometimes. I turned toward her. She did not turn toward me. Our marriage did not break that night. It changed shape. For the next week, we moved carefully around each other. She stopped leaving her purse in the hallway. I stopped asking where she was going. That silence felt polite and dangerous. Then Thursday arrived. At 2:10, Marion put on her coat. She paused beside the door. Neither of us spoke. She left alone. I did not follow her that Thursday. I sat at home and watched the clock move from 2:10 to 3:30. At 3:45, Marion came in. She hung up her coat. "Did you see him?" I asked. No. The question sounded foolish. She answered anyway. That evening, I told her I want to call shelters, recovery programs, and former employers. No. We could look. I have looked. How? Quietly. Years ago. She had called Peter's old union office, 2 recovery centers, and friends whose numbers still worked. Nobody knew where he was. One man thought Peter went to Nevada. Another thought he had changed his last name. There was no useful trail. Why stop? Because searching became another way of refusing what I knew. And the bench isn't? She looked down. No, the bench is different. I understood, though I could not have explained why. Searching demanded an answer. The bench allowed a possibility. We began counseling the following month, not because a counselor could locate Peter, because Marion had built 16 years of Thursdays outside our marriage, and I had built the original silence with one selfish sentence. I apologized. More than once. The first apology sounded like an explanation. The second sounded like guilt. The third was shorter. I took your choice away. Marion nodded. Yes. She apologized too. I let the silence punish you after it stopped protecting you. Yes. Neither apology repaired the lost years. They only stopped us from pretending those years belonged to one person's failure. On Wednesday night, Marion set 2 coffee mugs beside the machine. Then she removed one. I noticed. You go tomorrow? Yes. Do you want company? She looked at me for a long time. I don't know. That's fair. The next afternoon, she stood by the front door with her coat buttoned. I waited in the kitchen. Finally, she said, "You can come if you don't ask me to stop looking." I won't. And if I think I see him, don't tell me it isn't him before I know. I won't. She opened the door. For the first time in 16 years, Thursday belonged to both of us. We reached Riverfront Park at 2:27. Marion walked ahead of me. At the third bench past the footbridge, she sat on the left side and placed her purse beside her. Then she moved it to the ground. I sat on the right. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. People passed. A woman pushing twins in a stroller. A man in a red rain jacket. Two teenagers sharing earbuds. An older couple walking a small white dog. Marion studied each face without staring long enough to make anyone uncomfortable. What's it here? At 2:46, a tall man with gray hair came down the path. Marion's back straightened. The man turned toward us. For 1 second, I understood how hope could ignore 16 years. Then he passed. Marion let out a breath. I did not say anything. A little after 3, the coffee vendor walked over. "Two today?" Marion looked at me. "Yes." He brought 2 paper cups. She held hers between both hands but did not drink. At 3:25, she said, "Peter hated coffee. I remember. He drank it anyway if someone else was buying. I remember that too." The clock on the nearby building reached 3:30. Marion did not stand immediately. Neither did I. The path continued filling and emptying. Every stranger arrived carrying a life we could not see. At last, Marion touched my sleeve. Not my hand. Not yet. Just the fabric near my wrist. We stayed on the bench while people moved past us, one face after another, and together we kept watching.